Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be answering a frequently asked question that I get, which is how often should you see a psychic? So if you're new here, welcome. I am Lauren. I'm a psychic. I'm a medium. I'm an animal communicator. I do a lot of private one-on-one readings as well as like teaching people here on my channel how to develop their psychic abilities. And so I get a lot of questions from people who want to see me often, and they want to know how often is too often. And I think that's a great question, and it's also kind of subjective, and it depends on the psychic. It's definitely variable. You'll find psychics who have very strict rules. You'll have psychics that just don't care, and they'll see people constantly. And because there's no like governing body of like psychics, there's no like industry standard. There's no one out there making rules for what all psychics should or shouldn't do, which is a downside and a good thing. I don't know. I see it as a downside. But because there's no like set thing, there's no like industry standard out there. And that's why you'll see it be completely different for each psychic. So my first piece of advice is just to ask the psychic because everyone is different. But in this video, I'm personally going to talk about what I believe is too much and what I believe is like an okay range. And maybe you can apply it to your own psychic readings. Now, my personal opinion on how often you should see a psychic is really when you need extra guidance, when you feel like you can't connect to your own intuition, maybe you've been trying and you just feel a little lost. Now, if you're more on the side of you're just kind of itching to see a certain psychic, maybe you just want to check in, you don't really have like any pressing needs, I think like 2 or 3 months when you just don't like care, or not care as much as like you don't have like something you really need answered. I think that's a good range. I also think like once every 6 months is a good range. It completely depends on your needs and like how comfortable you feel trusting your own intuition. In my ideal world, everyone would trust their intuition on themselves, and then they would never have to see a psychic, but I know that doesn't happen. However, if you have like something coming up that you need help making a decision on, like you have a job application, or you just lost a job, or a relationship that you need advice on, I don't think it's the worst thing if you're meeting a psychic maybe once a month. And maybe you just got something new in your life going on. Maybe you already saw them last month, but now you want to talk about something completely different over here. Honestly, like 1 month is my like shortest amount of time that I would like recommend. However, it's variable for me because I feel like if we're talking about something completely new and different, like if last month we talked about your grandmother who passed away, but this month you've got again like a new job and we're just completely talking about something different, like I just don't feel like I should be like, no, you can't come to me, you're seeing me too often. However, I do think there's a line that is way too often, and I will enforce it with people. However, if somebody is seeing me more than once a month or wants to, which they can because I have a booking system, so like anybody can just go on my website right now and book a reading. And I can refund them and like cancel it up front if I need to, but most of the time I let them come and see me and then we talk about, why are we meeting too often, if we're meeting too often. And usually I feel like it's a couple things that make me kind of set that boundary. And the first thing is when I feel like they're not trusting their own intuition. I feel like sometimes when people go to psychics, they will often use the psychic as a way to make decisions and not trust their own decision making. So when it starts to float into that, I start to wonder if maybe I need to say, hey, let's take a break for a while. Another thing that often happens is if we're talking about the same thing over and over again. If we've had one session right after another and we're just answering the same questions, I start to ask, okay, is this person actually listening? And usually I feel like it's that they're not. Again, this is completely subjective, but if we're talking about the same breakup for 3 times in a row and the questions are the exact same and the answers are pretty similar because the energy hasn't changed very much, usually that's when I tell somebody, hey, let's take a break. I want you to use your own intuition. I want you to trust your own decisions. Like you can't live by a psychic's like every word. And sometimes this is also when I might recommend therapy for somebody else, because if you're really needing to talk to somebody that often, that's when we should start to see a therapist. So, side note, I talked to a new therapist recently, and she was joking about how she feels like most of the times people go to psychics before they come to her. And I was like, yep, that sounds about right. Another key thing to look out for, also if you're a reader, is if you feel like they're just not taking action. Like if there's been no change. Maybe you gave them advice, not that they have to take your advice, but if it's clear that they've like sat on their hands between the last time they talked to you and this time, that's also a sign that they're looking for something else that's probably not within like a psychic's capacity. They're wanting to hear what they want to hear. It might just be that they just need to talk about it, which is okay, but again, that's like a therapist's job, not a psychic. So personally, I would keep these in the back of your mind as a reader or even as somebody who goes to a psychic. If you feel like you're starting to do these things, maybe it's a good time to go see somebody else or to just take a break from psychics and work on it yourself. Take a break from it. And then again, if you're a reader, if you start to notice these patterns, that's when I would start to set a boundary of like, hey, let's take a break. Maybe come talk to me again in like 2 or 3 months. And this is one of the hardest things to do as a psychic because you're basically telling someone to stop like coming to you for help. And it can be like, oh my gosh, well, what if I lose them as like a client forever? I feel like unfortunately that has happened where I've told people, hey, you're seeing me a little too often, and I think they get embarrassed. And then I never hear from them again. And I think that's, it's just what it is. And I know that there's no stopping them from going and seeing another psychic. However, we have to remember our ethics and our boundaries. And if we're constantly just like, yes, 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 let me just keep talking to you about this and we're going to talk about it tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and I'm just going to keep taking your money. Like, we want to make sure we're not jumping over that line of getting into an unethical situation. And I think that unfortunately a lot of psychics take advantage of people in those positions and make them feel like they have to keep coming back, keep coming back. So I think it's our responsibility as psychics to kind of stop people, and our responsibility as people going to psychics to stop ourselves as well. And so usually what I say to these people is I usually wait till the end of the reading to not make it weird. And I try to do my best to still like focus on that reading and give it like a new, fresh perspective, even though I might have seen them a little too recently. And then at the end, I'll say, you know what, let's take a break from this. I really want you to trust your own intuition, and I want you to make your own decisions here. And I'm worried you're relying on me a little too much. So how about if you want to come see me again, let's wait at least like 3 months. And that's usually what I say. People are pretty like receptive to that. I've had to do it several times recently for some reason, so this is like very fresh on my mind. But I think another reason for this is if you as the psychic are reading into something too often, you're not getting the space that you need from the situation. So you could be frustrated that that person is calling you about the same thing, and therefore that frustration can affect your bias. You have this bias of like, oh gosh, why don't they just like get over this person? And then it forces you to not read the situation correctly. Or maybe you're reading it so often that there's literally not enough time for things to change and move forward. Or again, you might just remember every single part of the previous reading, and that's kind of a bias coming in to affect that reading. You're remembering all of those details. So I think it's totally okay to also just say something along the lines of like, I think I'm reading this too often and I want to make sure that I'm getting enough space from it so that I'm coming in with a fresh slate and I'm being like as accurate as I can. And for those of you that are readers, you have to remember you are not responsible for people. You are not responsible for the situation, on if they take your advice or not. And that can be really hard because you want to be able to help people, but at some point you might have to step in and help them help themselves. And you might have to say, hey, we got to take a break for a while. Or, you might get into a little bit of like, we need to like not talk to each other, and maybe you need to find a completely new psychic. I talk about that a little bit in my psychic development masterclass course, like how to deal with difficult clients. And I talk about like all the different types of people that you'll come across that are difficult. but ultimately you have to make sure that you don't turn into their therapist, because you are not a therapist, you're a psychic. And so sometimes you have to, know when to draw that boundary with that client. And I also get it. Sometimes you really need the money. And like, I struggled with that when I first started, but I always made sure to put my integrity above all else, to put like my ethics above all else, and not just take things because I wanted the money and I really knew that I should have turned people away. I probably did it like once or twice, but then I felt really crappy about it. And then I felt really like, I shouldn't do that again. So I think it's important to put yourself, your integrity, your ethics above your client wanting to see you too often. So hopefully that kind of explains why this can be so variable. You could technically be seeing me once a month and we could be talking about something completely different each time. And that's totally fine and totally cool. You could be seeing me just every 6 months just to check in and see what's going on, and that's also fine. But again, I think as psychics, we all have to kind of define the line of when often is too often. Do I feel like they're listening? Do I feel like they're taking action? Are we going over the same exact things over and over again? If you're a psychic out there and you have any other indicators that you use, please share them down below with everybody, because I think this will just help make us more stronger as a community, more, again, ethical. And I think it's really important to kind of set a standard of expectation with all of our clients that come in. So to sum it up, I would say maybe once a month if you've got pressing needs. Other than that, maybe every 2 or 3 months. But that's my personal policy. Everyone is going to be different out there. And just know too that you can ask me questions every single month on Patreon. I basically do a Q&A session where everyone can throw psychic development questions at me, business questions about, being a psychic, and I basically respond in a monthly video to everyone. So if you've got more pressing questions, if you want to learn more, jump on over to Patreon and join at a membership level, and I will see you over there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was super helpful. If it was, please give it a like, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!